Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Feelin Hot event in which the Volcanic Golem is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as the Volcanic Golem, it comes in with a bunch of brown red arcanes if you want to stack up. As far as the troop itself, it is pretty average, mostly going to be used for early on in the game, maybe into mid game, as a burning option. It ends up exploding a gem and then burns a random enemy for every red gem destroyed, and then gains a bunch of life and armor, meaning that'll be decently tanky and can still do a bunch of damage through the 3 damage per turn off its burn, and it also gets to do double to those burns, and even has some red link going into it. So as far as from earlier on in the game, if you don't have like a triple damage burning hero class yet, this would be a pretty good alternative up to that point until you actually have a level 100 hero class, and could potentially even be used as one of your better burners early on in the game. So definitely worth getting this thing fully traded. Definitely worth having if you're earlier on in the game, but it will die out pretty quick the later you get into the game, as pretty much every single aspect of what it does get outclassed by other things within the game. But overall, not horrific if you're still below level 1000, as there's still quite a few ways that you can end up incorporating it, either for its burn or for its double damage to those burns, while having overall somewhat half-decent traits. So worth considering in that regard. Aside from that, it's just basically going to be used for a little bit of glory. If you want to use it for some glory this week, you do get 5 additional glory every single time you end up using in PvP. Also, don't forget, if you want to get the very exceedingly strong new mythic, we covered 2 videos on it this weekend. One just over general teams and the other one on the quick kill teams. But it is still available for several more days. You have until Friday reset, so basically the end of Thursday, to go pick up yourself an Ironhawk. I highly advise doing it. It's one of the best troops in the entire game now, assuming they don't nerf it. Hopefully they don't. But in its current state, it's used for some of the quickest farming teams in the entire game, so definitely make sure to go get yourself a copy if you can, and all the keys that you get from your guild and stuff you can go throw at it. And if you don't end up getting it, you will be able to get it for diamond at some point, though it will probably be several months before it rotates around. And we have a pretty good Soulforge this week too, once we get around to it. As far as the event key drop table this week, it is Broken Spire. Broken Spire I'd probably skip on, especially since if you're wanting to specifically use gems, you probably want to use it for to try to get the new mythic, rather than trying to get anything from Broken Spire. But Broken Spire, overall, its drop table doesn't really have too many good enticing things. It does have the best burner in the game, and Furnace, really good early mid-game option. A lot of things from this kingdom, really good in early to mid-game, which kind of makes sense. It's the very first kingdom in the entire game, so in that regard, I guess it's kind of decent. But overall, I wouldn't really bother spending your keys here. If you end up getting Amarak is pretty useless compared to Infernus, and Infernus falls off later in the game. Overall, I would just naturally get these things from keys. Maybe if you're earlier on in the game, you might want to throw maybe like 10, 50 or so, just to get a couple of these other troops like Taraxis, get some of the other stuff that might be useful earlier on in the game, a little bit more upgraded. But aside from that, there's nothing really too enticing to go open event keys for. So overall, probably a week you want to skip unless you're just trying to pick up a few things here or there. Maybe even a Shegra, though generally it's just a weaker version of Lord of Slaughter and a couple of the other converting weapons that exist within the game. Anyways, as far as guild-related events, we do have Guild Wars. Guild Wars, of course, the same thing as always, so make sure to not forget to go sit your defend team and everything related to that. Make sure you have 24 completely unique troops here, so you end up getting the 12,000 full bonus for having all of them being unique. Make sure to set your bonuses and do everything with that, and do your guild walls. Aside from that, as far as the Ward Lore event, it's pretty straightforward. We do have skull damage instead of spell damage, so you will have to use skull-oriented related things. As far as order, you just do it simply in rarity order, so pretty straightforward this week as far as what battles you would end up doing. It is a Defender War Master restriction, specifically on blue, a little bit of a weird mix, but there's a couple of decent options here. You have Dwarven Gate, so you can infinitely farm mana off of that. If you need a cheap tank, you have Frost Fire, which is a 65% reduction. You have things like Ironhawk if you want to use the new mythic. Elspeth on itself could be a pretty good mana generation, especially if it ends up hitting blue. Actually, I end up utilizing it for this team because you're restricted to blue, so if it hits blue, you're going to be getting a lot of mana from that. There's things like Lord of Slaughter, which obviously with the skull boost ratio is going to be pretty good, and a few other similar options like that. Overall, not the worst, not the best event week we've had. But there's definitely enough usable options that's not going to be too bad overall. But it is a little bit annoying that we have only skull damage and not skull plus magic, or even just magic straight up. But it'll still work out. There's enough skull options. Saturi, surprising enough, and double Saturi, pretty decent as well. because you end up getting the bleeds off a hero and then just skull spam off of this. And since you have skull boost ratio, it's probably the cheapest thing that would be pretty useful. It's an ultra rare from Fang Moor, so if you start throw some chaos shards there and you really need an option, that's probably one of your better bets if you feel like you have absolutely nothing to use for the event. So do be mindful of that. But it pretty much just plays out normally. Just do highest rarity and you'll be fine. Do it from highest to lowest. Okay, so as far as other stuff that we got going on this week, we got a couple things. Later this week, we're going to be getting a Battle Crasher for Valentine's. We don't know what bonus that will specifically we end up getting, but we'll have a Imp of Love. It's not currently out. I think it comes out midway through this week. I'm not sure the exact date, but it will be later this week, so if you want to get some a little bit extra resources from that, hopefully it's like gold or glory or something. Aside from that, this Tuesday, we have Depths of Sin faction. So we have that going on. We have the Wednesday pet for the Lunar New Year's. It is the year of the ox, so we are getting a ox. It's completely cosmetic, but it is a new pet nonetheless. This Thursday, we have a Warlord hero class. Warlord, not really the greatest. It's the first hero class you have, so a lot of people kind of already have it up, leveled a bit, but it's generally not one you should really use. There's a lot of other enrage hero classes and triple damage burning hero classes that do what it does a lot better, particularly things like Slayer hero class, Dragon Guard, and like all of them almost. So for the most part, you don't really need to bother with it. You use it a bit earlier on in the game, like almost everything with Broken Spire, but later into the game, you kind of just ditch it forever. And that's the class that we have going on. And then for Friday, we have a standard bounty hunter. I'll be bringing in another Broken Spire troop. It's actually not that bad either, though it has a bunch of explosions onto it, and it's a little bit tanky. It kind of reminds me almost of the turtle that we end up getting, just kind of a different variant that's more based on explosion rather than specifically brown. Of course, the meta is pretty heavy on brown, so the fact that it is doing explosions might not necessarily be as good compared to just using turtle, but nonetheless, it's definitely not a bad bounty troop. Outside of bounty, it won't be used, but within the context of bounty, it could definitely be decent as an exploder, as there aren't too many mass exploder options compared to what that thing could do. However, it does scale based on stats, I believe specifically HP, so if your HP is relatively low, it might not be as good compared to other options, compared to if you have nearly every HP Kingdom as max as it could possibly be. Anyways, as far as Soulforge, we got a lot of really good options. The most two noteworthy ones being Wild Queen and Arachne Weaver. I'm not sure why, but I feel like every single time Wild Queen is in Soulforge, it is a Guild Wars week, which is kind of convenient because that's the main thing she's used for, is Guild War, particularly green, brown, and purple. Guild War being able to be used for all those days. Even if she misses, she still gets pretty good value, pretty consistent at getting 9,600. However, she can accidentally miss and sometimes die. But whenever she does work, she pretty consistently gets over 9,500, even over 9,600 with the teams that she ends up getting incorporated in. The other one is Arachne Weaver, even though the hero class of the Orb Weaver hero class, as well as the Life and Death, which is normally used with, end up getting nerfed. It is still really good synergy with that of Arachne Weaver because they both hit the last two slots with true damage. And then you get a bunch of explosions. Obviously, your AI team uses specifically for defend normally. And it has pretty much one of the best trade setups in the entire game. It has a Stealthy Impervious combo, which is a really strong combo, combined with the best summon that anything has off of traits, or even just in general, a 75% chance to summon a web spinner when an enemy dies. So this is conditional on the enemy actually dying. However, the web spinner is really good, has triple damage to pretty much everything, as long as they can be webbed and or poisoned. Ends up doing triple damage to them and can get quite a bit of value, especially when you just get it out of nowhere, replace your first slot with it, and boom, it's just kind of one-shotting or two-shotting for skulls. So both really good options for Guild War as well, so kind of convenient that they ended up showing up this week. Vespera could be okay. Personally, wouldn't bother go out of your way for it, though. It's I don't feel like I personally use it. There's enough mana accumulators in the game that I don't feel like you need to go out of your way to get Vespera, so I'd probably just leave it be. And other than that, as far as legendaries, if you were to consider one, maybe Skyla. Skyla, mostly to use for its final trait, for its Bone Storm. There's a couple of really quick teams that end up utilizing it. It's a lot higher risk, higher reward kind of things, though. Like, they can reach a higher max speed or sometimes slower. You can run it for things like some Explore 12 teams that use with, like, Zugoff. You can end up incorporating into similar teams that run for pet battles. Overall, I probably wouldn't bother going out of your way for it. However, as far as legends are concerned, Skyla is probably the strongest that we have available this week. And as far as weapons, the long-awaited weapons are finally here. So if you have the resources for them, there are two really good weapons. One in particular that I'm pretty sure a lot of people have been waiting for, and that is Flammifer. Flammifer is used for two teams for the most part, though there are several other things you could try incorporating it into. But the two main teams are Yagoi Queen Titania team, where you end up using the Summer in the middle and just kind of getting a brown to red, getting a red storm, just going crazy, doing triple damage off of burning, off of this, getting getting a bunch of additional red and just kind of going crazy with Dialga and Queen of Tanya. It's also one of the strongest teams that uses no mythics in the game as far as damage output, so pretty nice in that regard as well. And Flammifer is kind of like the last thing that you need to fully put the team together. You can use Urskia Crown as alternative prior to Flammifer. However, Flammifer works out a lot better once you finally get it. But yeah, it's like a damage poke, get some red gems, pretty good. Other than that, it also gets a burn onto first slot, which is really relevant for triple damage burning hero classes, of course. Aside from that, Doomed Club. Doomed Club's main purpose is Truffle. Has really good synergy with Truffle plus Doomed Club, because Truffle feeds the green into himself and then feeds the brown into your hero, and then you get an automatic extra turn. You do full AoE off of that. You then do a Doomed Club and basically just auto win. It's really good for delving. It's really good for pretty much everything. There's not a single location that's really bad against as long as you're not up against freeze. So yeah, it's pretty solid. Definitely worth considering. Out of the 6, it's probably the second strongest or so, second, third. It really depends. I do feel like I use this probably the second most. I feel like I use the purple one the most. Brown one probably the second most, and maybe green the third. It's kind of toss up between green or brown. They're both really good. But the other 3 are still used too, of course. But I do feel like of the 6, this is definitely one of the slightly more used one, just because of its Truffle synergy. Theoretically, it has Queen Beatrix synergy as well, though more often than not, I feel like Doomed Club is specifically used more so with Truffle than it is Beatrix. But a really solid weapon, pretty pricey as it is a Doom weapon, but if you have the resources for it, highly worth considering Flammifer and or Doomed Club. If you had to go one or the other, well, it really depends on which one you need. Probably Flammifer, just because of its Zugaf synergy if you have Zugaf, and even if you don't, there's a all-legend team that doesn't need any mythic. So Flammifer probably would be overall best, because it has like a better lower team and a better higher team. But Doom Club, I don't know. It's a really hard decision. It really just depends which one you want, if you want to go one or the other. But ideally, you have enough to get both, because they're both really solid weapons, and won't be around for a while until Broken Spire comes back again. But that's basically everything relevant in Soulforge, unless you want to pick up some of the other ones for completionist purposes. Anyways, aside from that, let's go over all the teams. Of course, as usual, they will all be in the description below as well. So, for the Ward Lore event, you've probably already seen it off the one screen, but it's a Rope Dart, a Lord of Slaughter, Satari, and Princess Elspeth. If you do not have Lord of Slaughter, you could just double up on Satari. You might even be able to get away with triple Satari. Basically, the premise of this is you go cast Princess Elspeth, the mana will feed into Rope Dart, so you can go Rope Dart whatever the most intimidating thing is on the opposing team, and a single skull with how much damage you'll have will just instantly kill it. You then use the Lord of Slaughter plus Satari, or simply double Satari in order to skull spam them to death. One reason that this will work is once you get the Rope Dart kill off of the Elspeth into Rope Dart combo, you will get Bleed onto all enemies. Once you have Bleed onto all enemies, Satari does a boost ratio. It's boosted by bleeding enemies, so if all enemies are being bled, you're getting a total of 8 additional gems, which will be a total of 14 skulls, which means every single time you cast this, you are essentially, assuming none of them have died yet, you'll be getting 14 skulls, or 12 skulls, and then 10 skulls, as far as how many of them are still alive, because you'll pretty much have perpetual bleed between bleeding whenever an enemy dies, and combined with Lord of Slaughter's multi-bleed. If I'm not mistaken, he also does one bleed himself onto a random enemy whenever he does his cast, so even if you just need a refresher there, like if they're not dead yet, you can still get it. So there's multiple ways that you can end up getting it out. And should be pretty fine. You have obviously the skull increase, so should just tear away everything. You can do with Slayer class ideally. There are a few other hero classes, though. If you don't do Slayer class, do keep in mind you will not have the extra bleed option, so you're going to have to depend entirely on Lord of Slaughter's bleed and Satari's bleed in order to make it work. Unless Elspeth somehow does it, though I'm not sure if any knight actually has a bleed mechanic. Anyways, as far as cheaper teams, there's kind of 2 that you can end up incorporating. The absolute cheapest team, which is what we have here, is Dwarven Gate Spam into pretty much any weapon. Ideally one that creates skulls, so if you have a skull creating weapon that you can use that is blue related, because it does have to be blue unfortunately, you can end up doing that. But basically you just get the Dwarven Gates up off of enchant, because it will guarantee be blocked on blue unless you use hero in a different slot, though you generally want to use it in first due to its higher attack compared to Dwarven Gate, due to Dwarven Gate having a base attack of 0. It still has attack though, because of kingdoms and everything, but it does have a base attack of 0, so do be mindful of that if you are using it in first. But basically, you just use triple Dwarven Gate into a hero class weapon, ideally one that is 15 mana cost or lower. However, if you want to use like a doomed blue weapon that creates doom skulls, you could do that. Even though it's 18, it would still end up working out. But pretty much any weapon you want to do, just triple Dwarven Gate. Alternatively to this, you could just go and spam billion Satoris. But if you want looking for something even cheaper than that, Dwarven Gates would be the way to go. You also gain barrier spam and a lot of survivability from it as well, so you're pretty much hopefully not going to die. Anyways, as far as the not Ward Lore event, as far as the faction, we have the faction of Depths of Sin, as it is a red purple restriction. As far as what you can end up using for it, you can actually use the standard Phoenicia quick kill team for a lot of the earlier battles. This is likely what I'll be running for the entirety of it, since we're just doing the free battles up to the point of the of all rewards, or it normally costs like 30 gems, but that's basically free relative to what you get in return. But as far as just doing the basic up to like 80, up to 90, it should be perfectly fine for most of the time, if not the entire time. You just use Sunspare for the Red Storm, deal double damage off of Phoenicia, and you pretty much just deal a lot of damage and kill it off a quick kill Phoenicia. And you get a bunch of gold and souls along the way too for free. Aside from that, if you want to go deeper, you can just run Tesla, just run a Thrall, get all the mana you need. You can do her Chaos Shield if you want to go gain even more armor, so she has more boost ratio for her true damage. However, you could simply use pretty much any weapon you want there. It doesn't have to be her Chaos Shield. It's just one of the slightly more safer ones. It can help pressure damage with Tesla. Aside from that, as far as Pure Faction, there's a couple different ways you can run this depending on if you want resummon or not. However, the main thing that you need to build around is this legend. This legend ends up dealing additional damage based on their attack. So this can end up doing a lot of additional damage, obviously, because the on faction level 500 for Pure Faction, they're obviously going to have a pretty high attack, so the amount of value that you get for doing damage based on their attack with a boost ratio like this is pretty good. It's one of the only few faction troops that actually has a boost ratio that ends up working out pretty well, so definitely make sure to utilize it for this. We basically just use this guy for mana accumulation, though you can try incorporating the resummoner if you really wanted to, and we use this up front in order to basically not die, and ideally he will survive all the way to the final battle. Tank him up, gains a bunch of HP and armor. He also has a 50% reduction, so he's generally going to be able to keep alive and just kind of go from there and win. This thing also gives a quarter to all purple, which is literally everything else, so you create a bunch of purple and give them a quarter of their mana, so even if they're blocked, they're still going to be getting a little bit of mana. Even if you keep only getting mana to Iron Draw and the first Tartarus, you'd still be getting mana passively for the 1/4, plus the initial enchant would also get him up the initial time. If you feel like it's over blocking, it'll still get his mana. And aside from that, as far as the Warlord class events, you don't have too many options, but basically Dawnbringer into triple Gob Trumper, or really any AoE weapon that you want into triple Gob Trumper should be fine. You can run Black Manacle, you can run War and Peace, you can run pretty much anything there, as long as it hits all enemies and it's kind of synergized with the Gob Trumper. Ideally Dawnbringer, because it does gain boost ratio from how many yellows you have on your team, and given that you're using a pure team of yellow, it will gain 8 additional damage to all enemies, and the Gob Trumpers basically just clean up with their little damage pokes, and you just get a little bit extra damage there, in case they resummon because that one 100% summon troop, or if you just need to pressure them down because the single Dawnbringer or double Dawnbringer wasn't enough, and you just kill them out that way, and you're pretty much good to go. Anyways, guys, that will wrap it up for this video. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. We'll be streaming tonight, going over all of the Chapter 8 tasks. We also are getting the Sun this week, since we did end up buying the earlier pass. I'm not sure if we're actually going to get it tonight, because I didn't actually double check yet to see if any of the tasks are going to be delayed until tomorrow. But whatever day we end up doing it on, based on blocked tasks or not blocked tasks, we can kind of start going over the Sun then, because that Sun is kind of like Divinia, except a really low mana cost. It's kind of interesting. It's somewhat viable, but probably won't be meta. Like, it's usable, but it's not really going to be used that often. I feel like Divinia in general is kind of the same way in that sense, except Divinia does have cleanse, so it finds its way into teams occasionally on top of everything else that it has. But anyways, we'll go over that. It's probably going to be used to craft some kind of Doom rarity troop, boss rarity troop by the end of the season anyways, and we'll go from there. But anyways, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone.